All right. Well, welcome to this edition of Your Health, Your Wealth. And today we are going to talk about chronic disease. I really want to dive into a series on chronic diseases and the cost of these diseases, both from an economic standpoint to patients, but also just about the impact to life and what it means to live with some of these chronic neurological conditions. I have a wonderful guest with me today, Jenesha Barnett. We are going to hear from Jenesha and hear about her story and about her advocacy work and the work that she's doing in MS. So I am excited and welcome today and excited to talk more about this.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. But let me start off first by just giving an overview on what is multiple sclerosis. And I'll shorten it and say MS throughout this interview. But multiple sclerosis is a chronic disease that has both inflammation and what's called demyelination of the central nervous system. Our nerves are like cords. They have insulin around them. That's called myelin. And in certain conditions where you have an autoimmune attack on that myelin, it slows the function of those nerves and can cause disability and problems associated with that. The thing about MS, why it's such a profound disease, is that it can affect anywhere in the central nervous system. So you're talking about the brain and the spinal cord, mostly in the brain and the upper spinal cord, like the cervical spine and the thoracic spine or the mid-back. Usually it affects people, what we call during those most productive years, the 20s to 40s. And so when you look at the actual impact that MS has on patients, because it is during these child productive years and working, it can have a profound impact. Women are 2 to 3 times more likely to be diagnosed than men. And the symptom burden of MS, it varies a lot. I remember in training, there are a couple of conditions that were like what we call universal mimickers, meaning that they can cause any or a wide variety of neurological signs and symptoms. And MS is one of those things because it really all depends on where the attack happens, in the brain or the spinal cord and so forth. And there's several different types of MS. The most common is what's called relapsing remitting, where you have like an attack and then a smooth period, and you can have another attack. Then there's secondary progressive and primary progressive as well. And the treatment landscape has changed dramatically over the years. And, we're going to talk about that. I remember in training, when I went through neurological training, we had what's called an ABCD treatment. That was it. You had steroids, you had Rebif, you had Betaseron and Copaxone. And that was pretty much it when it comes to how you were able to treat this disease. Now you fast forward to today, and there are over 20 treatments now for acute attacks and chronic disease-modifying therapy for MS. And these treatments are not cheap, but it really has helped us to be able to specify treatments for individual patients. So now that we know a little bit more about MS, let's jump into our interview with Jenesha and just find out. What I want you to first start out is, tell the listeners about your journey, about your personal journey with MS. What were some of the first signs and symptoms that you experienced that made you go see a neurologist, and tell us more about your journey with dealing with this.
My first signs and symptoms really were over a period of time. Nothing in my life ever happened together. I would have something happen one time, and then nothing would happen until a year later, or maybe 2 years later. But as I tracked it, because I always kept a journal, those things would always happen around really stressful times in my life. When I was in college, it was always at finals. I would end up not feeling well. Things would hurt. Things would stop moving the way they were supposed to move. And so I started going to the doctor. And I actually ended up in the emergency room while I was in college. And through that experience, I ended up being misdiagnosed, which happens a lot. And they believed that I had lupus because they used steroids to treat me, and it worked. So they were like, oh, we think it's lupus. Let's treat it as lupus. And so they started treating me like that. But then everything would go away. And so they were like, well, we really don't know. We think this, we think that. And so as I grew more in my adult life and work and life was lifing, then other things would start to happen. And one day my legs just actually gave out. And I fell down the stairs in my own home. I ended up in the emergency room at Methodist Hospital. And in that, they thought I had a stroke because after a couple of days, I ended up being paralyzed on my entire left side.
Wow.
And they said, oh, you've had a stroke. I said, no, I don't think it's a stroke. And, I wasn't trying to self-diagnose, but you know your body. You know when something is not right, when things don't sound right. So they started doing all of the stroke testing to try to eliminate that, and nothing was coming back as a check mark for a stroke. So they were at a loss. And it was somewhat entertaining to see all of these top docs in the emergency room at Methodist baffled by my condition and what was going on. And it just so happened that a neurology, I don't know if he was a resident or a fellow, he walked into the emergency room to see a patient. And he saw my scans on the little board. They had my MRI and my CAT scan up there. And he thought it was his patient.
Oh, wow.
His patient was in the emergency room for an MS relapse. And so he thought that my scans belonged to his patient. They were like, no, that's not your patient. There's someone else that we have. We're trying to figure out what's going on. And he was like, well, she has MS and she's in a relapse. And they were like, she didn't say she has MS. And so he was like, yeah, but she does. So even if she doesn't know, that's what's going on. And so they came and talked to me about it. And I said, I don't know what that is. I don't think I have it, but why does he think I have it? And so he came and talked to me, and everything that he described sounded like what I've been going through for so many years. It was the first time that a light bulb went off. And it was like, ding, ding, ding. Something about this seems familiar. And so he said, we just have one more test that we need to do. Let's do a spinal tap. And I immediately said no because I didn't want them to go into my spine without anesthesia. And so that freaked me out, and I said no. And my mom was like, no, you need to do this. I was like, that's easy for you to say. And she said, well, your faith should sustain you in this. The God that you trust will be in that OR with you. Trust him. You may finally have the answers that you've been looking for. And so my own words came back to haunt me because I work in a cancer center, and that's the kind of things that I share with my patients in the hospital. You know, let your faith sustain you. Trust the doctors when they say that something is needed, that you may really need it. They're the experts. They've gone through the training, and she used everything that I was telling all of these other people to convince me to do the spinal tap with no anesthesia. And that it still freaked me out, but I said, okay.
Wow.
And we did it, and within 2 hours, I have results. And they said, you have multiple sclerosis. And I said, okay, what do we do now?
And, you talk about misdiagnosis. And I often see that because, as I mentioned earlier, this disease can affect anywhere in your central nervous system. So it can affect your vision. It can affect numbness and tingling. You can have weakness, as you described. So a lot of times, unless you have that astute clinician like this, I love to take credit and say it was me, but like this resident or whoever was in the ER, you can be misdiagnosed.
Nothing ever happened together. And so it would be sporadic symptoms. And nobody ever put them together, including myself. I didn't believe or have any reason to believe that they were related because no one in my family had MS or had anything like I was experiencing. So it never dawned on me that all of the symptoms through the years were connected.
And the connection of the symptoms. I talked earlier about the impact that this disease has on someone's life. And things like missing work, different things like that. Talk a little bit about how, now that you've got this diagnosis, you're starting on this journey, what type of impact has living with MS had on your life personally?
It has changed my life drastically. Initially, after the diagnosis, I didn't work for probably about 2.5, 3 years. I stayed home. It affected my mental health because I went through a depression. I didn't even know that I was depressed until after the fact. You know how people say hindsight is 20/20?
Yep.
I realized that I was depressed, but I didn't want to do anything. I would get my daughter to school, and as soon as I would drop her off to school, I would come back home, and I would just lay in the bed and cry because I couldn't understand why it was happening to me. I was trying to find out information about MS. I couldn't find anything, but it wasn't that it wasn't out there. It's just I didn't know where to look. And so then it was time to go back to work. I had, thank goodness, purchased insurance from the Affordable Care Act. So that's how I was able to start treatment. And so when I purchased my insurance, I was looking for insurance that was particularly going to cover multiple sclerosis.
Yes.
And cover the medications that I have found online that I might start, and cover the doctors that I wanted to see. But to have to do all of this when you're not working, like that just made the depression even worse because I was like, how am I going to afford this? My finances were okay, but it was okay when I seemed like a healthy person.
Yeah.
But now I was going to have all of these doctor's appointments and I was going to have all of these really expensive medications. But when they said expensive, I was thinking like, okay, $100, $200, I'm going to pay for medicine. I had no idea what was to come. But I did end up going back to work because I had to snap out of my depression. I was tired of sitting at home. I was bored, and I felt like I was going to waste. And so I went back to work, and I got insurance through my employer. And so then I got to see the doctors that I really needed to see, and prescriptions started coming through, and I was like, oh, my God, how am I going to do this? Prescriptions were running a couple of thousand.
Oh, wow.
And so without health insurance, I wouldn't have been able to manage that. So the stress of going back to work alone started putting me in a relapse. So I had been normal while I was sitting at home crying. Yeah. But when I got back into the workforce and I started moving around and interacting with people and not just sitting still, it all came down on me at one time. And so then I really learned about FMLA that's offered under laws in this country, thank goodness. But then I had to figure out, do I tell my employer or do I not tell them? Does policy require that I tell them, or can I just apply for the FMLA and keep it a secret and they don't have to know why? But then with all the appointments, how do I tell them I need to keep missing work when they just hired me? So it was a whirlwind of things that affected me in being in the workforce, trying to raise a child. I had gone through a divorce. I was raising my child on my own. So it was like, again, life was lifing and it was doing way too much, but I had to figure out how I was going to manage it all. So I just took it one day at a time.
That's why I think you're such a good advocate for others because it's not uncommon. And you touched on so many things there, but I often tell patients, even with the diagnosis, is that there are a few things where, okay, you need to make sure and talk with your insurance company and make sure that you choose the right type of insurance, just like you rightfully did, to make sure that the drugs are covered. Because we've seen, and with this condition, some of the most expensive medications, and it's unfortunate, even as a clinician, there are certain patients that I want to treat with this particular treatment, but I can't. The cost of treatment is very high, and the insurance company, through different things like prior authorization. So prior authorization for the listeners is where you may go to an insurance company and they have a panel, and they'll say, well, appreciate it, doctor, you've done all this workup, you diagnosed this patient, you want to put them on A, but A is not a part of our panel, so they need to go on B or C, another medication. They need to fail that first before we'll let you put them on whatever you want to do. But failing a drug in multiple sclerosis could mean loss of vision. It could mean, weakness on one side or the other. So it's a very, I think that system, particularly when it comes to MS and the ability to treat MS, something we really need to work on from a policy standpoint.
I
Have
agree.
you seen any of that in your journey?
I have. Right now, I am on my 4th MS drug, but every single one, because they are very expensive and highly specialized medications, has called for prior authorization. And you have to have a clinician who is willing to fight for you with the insurance companies. But you're paying for this insurance, whether it's out of your own pocket or through your paycheck and your employer is helping cover the cost. And you're literally having to fight for what's best for you. And if you don't have a doctor who is an advocate for you and for his patients, then you could end up in a worse position because disability could progress a lot faster. Or some people who just don't have the strength could just give up and not take any medications.
Yeah.
In some of the groups that I'm in, I have a lot of people who just don't take any medication because they don't want to go through the fight and they can't afford to. And a lot of the drug assistance comes when you are employed and you have insurance through a group employer. And they'll help you. But if you have Medicare, Medicaid, they won't.
Yeah.
Which is typically the group of people that need the help the most, because Medicaid is income-based and Medicare is typically for those who are either disabled or our older population. And that's why I've been telling a lot of the people that I interact with that this time of the year, ironically, elections are so important. It's funny that we're doing this now, right before the presidential election, but it's the elections in between when we're putting legislators in office that really matter, because those are the people who are going to make laws and who are going to advocate for lower drug costs or for you not to have all of these prior authorizations. Your clinicians spend all of this time in school. They go way past the 4-year degrees. They have a lot of medical school debt, but then insurance companies don't trust them to make the decisions. So why am I spending all my time and money to go see this doctor who specializes in neurological diseases, but my insurance company won't trust him to pick the medication that's best for me because they don't want to pay for it? So I make sure that if I can't speak to the head of the insurance company, which I will do, because I will get on Google and I will just research until I find who I need to talk to. I will go to the top. I will send emails. I will do whatever I have to do. I used to get on Twitter, but I don't really use X because I had closed my account. But I would get on Twitter and I would tweet the heads of these companies to say, hey, do you care about the people or do you care about the bottom dollar? What are you in place for? Because if I don't get this medication, then this is what can happen to me. But you don't know my case. You don't know my story. You don't know what I go through on a daily basis. But this doctor who wrote the prescription does. He sees me. He treats me. So he knows what I'm dealing with to know which medication is best for me. And so I use every avenue that I can. But right now, I'm definitely using the tool of voting. And I'm paying attention to the presidential election just like everybody else in the country. But I'm also paying attention to the legislatures that I put in office and what they stand for. And I write to them. I send emails to let them know, hey, I'm a constituent, and this is what matters to me. Where do you stand on this issue? This is why it matters to me. Do you want to talk to me? Do you want to see how, if you make a decision this way or that way, it can impact real life people? Because they get in these offices and they kind of forget about the little people.
Yeah.
And MS patients are some of the little people who are really affected by the cost of drugs. It's not just Medicare recipients. And it's nothing against those people. We have so many different groups that are affected by the decisions that are made in government, and people have to pay attention. I have so many people around me who are saying, well, I don't like either candidate, so I'm not voting. And I'm like, there's more than a president on that ballot, right?
Yeah.
So there are other things that you can vote for that can impact someone's life. And voting for your state legislators and your national legislators are the ones that really make a difference in the cost of health care for all of us.
Most people don't understand the process. The state runs the insurance for that state, so that's where your state legislators come in. There's federal pieces too. But like you said, getting involved.
Right.
And I know that you are very active in the MS from advocacy standpoint. So tell us a little bit more about what you're doing from that standpoint?
Well, I have recently taken a position on the board for the MS Society for the South Central region. I participate in the MS Walks to help raise money for finding a cure. I like to support organizations and events where I know the money is really being used for what I need it to be used for. And so the MS Society definitely supports research, and we're getting closer and closer to a day where I'm going to be able to say I had MS and
go.
Not that I'm living with MS. And so supporting this organization and being a part of that is really making a difference in my life and the lives of a lot of the people around me. I also support the MS 150, which is the bike ride. Now, I don't ride bikes 150 miles. That's just not my thing. But I go out and I cheer on the people who think enough of me and the cause to say, hey, I'm riding for you. I'm raising money to help find a cure so you can say you had MS. And so I meet them at the start line. I meet them somewhere in the middle. And I'll meet them at the finish line to thank them and show my appreciation. And I think that any cause that I can support that is going to help me get to the point where we can really put an end to this disease is where I'm going to be. I go to support groups, and I do a lot of things online to help people all over the country and encourage them as we go through this battle, because it is a battle. It's like a war, and every time we have a relapse or we have an issue with the drug, that's one battle that we have to overcome. And so part of that advocacy is just uplifting each other and encouraging each other. And in these support groups online, it allows me to reach a much larger audience than just the South Central region, which is Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. But it gives me a chance to go much broader. And so I've talked to people in Georgia. I've talked to people in the DMV. I've even talked to some people overseas who are in this same war with MS, and we're able to encourage each other. They have different issues that they're facing in other countries, but ultimately we're all just fighting the same battle to try to end this disease.
And just so y'all know, Jenesha's been on me about training and riding in the MS 150. I'm going to do it. Look.
I'm going to be right there at the finish line waiting on him to cross. I can say, see, you did it,
That's
Dr.
right.
Patton.
That's right. It's for years I've been said, but I'm going to do it, I tell you. And been a strong advocate for that. And I want to hear more about the groups that you've been a part of. One thing about MS is it is a community. It's a community, and because of the variation and symptoms, and different people have a different journey with this. What I've found helpful, particularly with some of my patients, is directing them to support groups and different things. And I know you've been very active with some different Facebook groups and different things like that. No. Tell me how that's really helped you you said you went through depression when you first got diagnosed and so forth. How has being locked into this whole community of MS had an impact on your personal journey through this?
It's helped me a lot. The first support group that I was in, I'll be honest, I didn't like it. There's no other way to say it. There's no nice way to say it. I didn't like it. When I went in and I listened to them talk, I kind of went in and observed first. I left out feeling like I was doomed. Like there was no hope. There was never going to be a cure. And in a short period of time, I would probably end up in a wheelchair based on this group. So I had to find something else. I was like, this can't be it. There has to be more to it than this. And so a young lady contacted me online because she had seen me hashtag MS. And she found me that way, and she actually is based in Atlanta, and she has a support group, and I got in and I observed, and I was like, okay, this is my village. Okay. These are the people that I was looking for, and we're all in different facets of the disease. It's a snowflake disease. That's what they call it. So we were experiencing different things, but somewhere in this group, you were going to find somebody who's going through what you had been through or what you were going through, and they could tell you how they got through it. And that's what helped me, was finding people who were still hopeful, who were believing that there was going to be a cure, who were helping to fight for a cure, who were doing walks. And I was like, what is this walk they were talking about? I'm like, do they have that in my area? And so I did keep my support group leader here in Houston as a resource, although I wasn't really attending the group. And she did allow me that. And so I reached back out to her to ask, hey, do you know something about a walk? And she was like, yeah, we have a team. And so I went to my first walk because of me finding a group online that was far, far away from me. But because they had a walk and attended, then I said, there has to be something here. That was the only way that I found out about it. And I went. And I felt like I had found more family.
Wow.
Because it was people who were really believing and hoping for a cure and doing their part to get to a cure. And that's what was important to me. Like, regardless of if this is chronic or not, somewhere somebody is going to find something that's going to make life better for us. And that's what I want to be around. That's what I want to support. And so finding all of these groups and all of these people who were like me, there were groups specifically for women. There were groups for women of color. There were groups for single mothers. It was an MS group. Whatever your niche was, there was an MS group for it. And I had no idea it was so much out there. So I just joined every single one to see which one was going to fit me best. And I found family somewhere in each and every group that I've joined, and they have been able to help me find other resources. Before I went back to work, they helped me get connected to the MS Foundation, and they provided me with a laptop so that I could try to work from home if that's what it ended up being. But the walls were closing in, so I had to get out of the house. But the laptop came in handy to do more research on what was out there. They helped me find things where my daughter could participate, because having a young child with an MS diagnosis, she really didn't understand what was going on. She just knew mommy was sick. And so there were other people, and we supported each other in how we explained this to our children, how we helped them deal with it. So it had a tremendous impact on me finding the online groups.
And I think that's so important. And what I really love in talking with you, this disease, MS, doesn't control your life. You're controlling it.
Right.
And that's such a passionate and such a powerful thing that patients need to know. So if you using this platform, if there's someone listening, maybe they just got the diagnosis, what are the things that you want to say to them on how to start this journey and to deal with this diagnosis?
I would say education is a huge part of the journey. I had to do the research and find the drugs that I was interested in. When I go to my doctor's appointments, I listen to what they have to say, but I found a doctor who would listen to me too. And so it was important so that he would understand the drugs that would work for my lifestyle and where my goals were to keep working and to keep being an active mom, because when you have a young child, you don't have time to just sit on the couch and watch TV. And so education, research, and definitely faith has helped sustain me through this whole process, and family.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they break and sever ties with their family because they feel like their family doesn't understand, but I help them to understand. Or I help them by telling them, you're not going to feel what I'm feeling. So I feel better when you don't say, oh, I understand. When I say I'm in pain, don't tell me, oh, I know what you're going through, because you don't. And so that's how I've been able to sustain relationships with my family, is letting them know to keep it real with me. Yeah. Don't tell me you know what I'm going through, because you don't know what MS pain is like. But no matter what, I keep my faith, and God has sustained me through all of this. Every step of the way, whether I'm encouraged or discouraged, I know that I can always turn to my faith and to my prayer life to get me through whatever part of the journey I'm on.
Wow. I tell you, this has been wonderful. Miss Jenesha Barnett, thank you so much for joining, and thank you for sharing with the audience. And tell me your title again.
I am a board member for the MS Society for the South Central region.
There you go.
Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma.
There you go. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing and really helping other people as they navigate through this journey. This has been inspiring for me, and I'm pretty sure that someone listening is going to take something positive away from this and realize that they're not alone, and that they should get involved and just like you said there in the end, get involved and realize you're part of a community.
Exactly. That's the most important thing.
I thank you all for joining me today, and tune in for future episodes of Your Health, Your Wealth. If you'd like to learn more about what I do, you can visit my website, eddiepattonmd.com, and please consider sharing and subscribing to the show. Thank you.